Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and what I'm want to talk about today is tag template literals. I've done videos on tag template literals before, but I thought I'd give you a little bit more information about how you could use them to create like a parser of some sort, like how you would use them to parse a string a little bit more in depth and give you some patterns and stuff like that. So let's just first talk about what a tag template literal is. Okay, so let's pretend I make a function called tag. Function tag. Okay. Now we're just going to say console.log hello. Okay, so there's my function. Now what can happen here is that instead of I can invoke this function by doing this. I can say tag, but instead of passing in like parentheses and passing in arguments, you use backticks and you can pass a string. So let's say h1 hello world. So now watch what happens when I run the program. Okay, so I wanted to do node scratch.js scratch. Oh, I'm not in the right folder. Let's just close this terminal. Reopen a new one because it's going to automatically open to the right folder. Node scratch.js. And see, so what it does is that this string no longer kind of exists. What it does, it's actually passed into this function of tag. Okay, and the thing is that it's not even passed like this. It's actually passed as a series of arguments. So typically what happens is you're gonna get two. Well, let's just actually just show you. So we're gonna do ... args. I'm using the spread operator to take all the different arguments and put them in one array called args. So let's see what happens when I run the code now. And let's console log args so we can see exactly what do we get back. Okay, and see the first argument is an array. It looks like it just is the string. So what's the point of that? Well, let's start using like interpolation and see what happens. So if instead of saying h1 hello world, I did this h1 and then said, okay, I want to inject the string of hello world here. Now let's watch what the output is. Okay. So see what happened is that it breaks up the string anywhere this shows up. And these normal pieces of text go in the first array. Or essentially, well, technically what happens is you have one array that is that, and then every one of these, anything that gets expressed, every expression that's done through these interpolations becomes an additional argument. So if I were to do this and then like afterwards inject another one, so let's say just like, you know, just put in the text of cheese. And again, any kind of JavaScript can go inside these curly brackets. It's just doing strings for simplicity. But see, it's an additional argument. Okay, which it's an interesting way of doing that. I mean, that's not particularly useful, but there's an easy way to get around that. What people usually do is they'll just make two arguments and say strings, which will retain this first array of the pieces. And then they'll do a second and then use the spread operator to get the remaining arguments and put that in like args. Okay, so now if I do strings, if I console log both of those, see now I have two separate arrays. So see, I have an array of all the pieces of the string. And even if there's nothing at the end, this array will always be one larger than this one. Okay, so that's going to be very important. Okay, so basically, again, we have our strings argument, which is going to be all these strings, and then everything that's from interpolation. Well, now let's just see like what happens when you do things like other expressions like 2 + 2. What do we get back in our arguments? See, I get back the number 4. Now, what if I were to pass a function? So here I'll just pass an empty function, just out of curiosity. So let's see what we get. Okay, so I'm passing the function. So basically, the result of the expression is what gets passed in. Okay, and then we have it to use as we see fit. Okay, so that's always kind of like the deal here. Like, okay, how would I then parse this? Like, and again, you can come up with a bajillion different ways to do it. Like, you can design tags that do all sorts of different things. So for example, probably the two most popular places you see this used is going to be the HTML tagged template in lit HTML from Google, and the GQL tag template for like GraphQL in pretty much any GraphQL library that parses the GraphQL queries. Okay, but again, this can be used to create all sorts of really cool stuff. Okay, so let's try to create something interesting. Okay, so let's pretend well, let's just do something simple first. Let's say that I want to parse I would basically let's do it this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to want there to be a object with some state. So for now, I'm just gonna statically define it. There's different ways. I'll show you some ways where you can make it dynamic. But const will say state. This is an example. Const state equals, and we'll say here we're gonna have cheese, which is gonna equal Gouda. I didn't really need those quotation marks, but whatever. And bread equals rye. Let me just get rid of those. They're gonna bug me. There we go. And I want to interpolate that. Okay, so basically what I want to do is be able to sit there and say tag, okay, and say, okay, H1, I would like there to be cheese in here. Okay, and then I would like there to be a div, and then there I want to kind of inject bread. Okay, and I want to do something like that and bind it to like this state here. Okay, so let's see. First, let's just see what we get back as our arguments. Okay, so see, I get cheese, bread, and then the different like strings. So the way to do this would be with a reduce. So what I want to do is return the string that's the result of a reduce. And I want to do that reduce on the strings array. The reason is because, again, that array is always going to have one more than the previous one. And I want to make sure that I don't miss out on that last string. So I'm going to do strings dot reduce. Okay, and again, just remember, reduce receives two arguments, our callback function, and then the starting value, which should be an empty string. So we're going to start off with an empty string, and then we're going to slowly build it up. Okay, and again, the argument to that reduce function is always going to be the accumulator, the item, and then theoretically the index, which we are going to want. Okay, so then what I would do is I would say, first I'm going to check to see, like, for whatever spot we're in this array, do we have a corresponding item in this array? Okay, so I'm going to say if, okay, args index, so like, is there an item in that part of the array? If there is, we're going to do something. Else, otherwise, we just have the string, so just basically take return wherever the string is currently, like our currently accumulated string, and add on that last piece, that last item. Okay. Now what I want to do is build in the state. So what I want to do is say if there is another argument, which means we had some sort of interpolation event, because again it would be like this, then this, then this, then this. So in that case, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to say accumulation. I want to return the accumulator, meaning our accumulated string, plus the item, because that would be the next thing, then plus state, but specifically whatever key is in args index. Okay, so basically what args index would basically take this args array and then bring in the index of where we're at. So let's say the index is 0, so that'd be cheese. So then cheese gets passed in as the key to the state object, and then we're getting what's inside the cheese key in here. So technically what I should be getting is like h1 Gouda div bread. Okay, so if this all works out, that's what I should get. Okay, well, I need to console log the result of this. Console.log. Okay, and that's what I get. h1 Gouda div rai. Okay, and that's just one way. It's one way I could do it. Okay. The only issue with that is what if I'm giving you something other than a string? You know, there's other things you might want to check for. So in that case, you know, I might want to do some extra logic that checks, hey, like if the thing in the args array, is it a string? Is it a function? Is it a number? Then do whatever I want to do with that. But the idea is, like, you know, I'm going to slowly rebuild the string using a reduce function and then basically parsing things out step by step. Now what I could do, if I want this state object to not have to be defined on different situations, I can do something like this. What I would do is maybe create one object. So in this case, what we're going to do is say this.state. This.state. Do I refer to state anywhere else? Nope. Which is fine. So then what I'll do is I'll nest it inside of an object. So I'll say const object1. Okay. Which is going to equal an object where we're going to input in tag. So tag is going to be a function inside the object. But then there's also going to be a state property inside the object, which is going to have, you know, cheese Gouda bread rye. Okay, and if you're familiar with just sort of like how these functions work, when you're using the function keyword, the context is going to be the context of the object that's invoking the function. So if I were to create two objects, so we'll make an object 2 that also has the tag function inside of it, but except this time this one says like provolone, and this one is white bread. Okay, now watch what happens if I do the same thing, except now it's obj1.tag versus obj2.tag. Because the idea is that, like, when obj2 does it, this is obj2. So when I say like this.state, that's really obj2.state, and vice versa. So I should get two different versions of the same thing. And say provolone white, Gouda rye. This would probably make more sense in a class. So you'd add this like tagged template function in a class, and then that class can then use it and then refer to its internal state in its parsing. But the idea behind this, like, or like the point of all this, is they kind of just give you some ideas like how you could use tag template literals to create, you know, if you want to create your own templating language or create something that needs to be some sort of need to parse these strings step by step. Okay, and just kind of see how this works and sort of how you would take advantage of sort of like this dollar curly bracket syntax and how it affects what goes inside these tag template literals. Okay, the alternative is you could just not use tag template literals and just, you know, split strings. So I could also do something like this. I could just sit there and say like function, not a tag. Okay. Function, not a tag. Okay, and then I could just say sit here and pass it in a string. Okay, pass it in a string. And first thing we could do is we could just say parse, you know, split string, or parsed const parse string, const parsed string. And then what I'll do is I'll just choose some arbitrary like way of splitting the string, like sort of like what is my marker that this needs to be split. So I'm going to pretend that I'm making up some sort of templating language and say, okay, hey, I want you to split this string dot split, and I want you to split it anytime you see a question mark followed by an exclamation point with a pipe in front of it. Okay. Okay, and again, I'll show you sort of how like this would look differently. Okay, so that would split the string. And let's just actually just console.log that so we can just kind of see where we're at right now. So now what I'm going to do is copy these two, and we're going to change these a little bit. So instead of tagging it, what we're going to do is we're going to say, first we're going to add not a tag to these objects. Not a tag. Not a tag. Cool. Okay, and then instead of these looking like this using backticks, so this will be like object not a tag, not a tag, and then these would need parentheses because it's a function now, or we're using it as a function, not as a tagged string. So instead of saying like here, cheese, what I would do is I would just use my marker just around the things I want to split. So I would say, okay, here, 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 here. Okay, and that would just kind of do the same thing up there. So let me just do that real quick, Control C. Okay, and right now I'm just going to get the console log. Just get the terminal. And see, now I get this breakdown of the array of the string. And I know that every other one must be some item that I need to like parse. So I can kind of play off of that. So I know 0, I don't need to parse. 1 I do, 2 I don't, etc. So I know that like basically all the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me see. That's 0, 1, 2. That's one string. 3. Yeah. So basically, all the odd numbers are the ones I would parse. Okay. So then what I can do here is then return parse string dot reduce. So same logic. I'm going to just parse through the array. And again, we're going to start off with an empty function. And our starting place, which is going to be an empty string. And then again, we receive our accumulator, our item, and our index. And I'm just going to return. Well, we'll just say this. If index, whatever the index is, if it's even, that's how I'm going to think about it now. If index modulo 2 equals 0, meaning it's even, else, okay, so if it's true and it's even, then we just want to return the accumulator plus the item. Okay, otherwise we want to return accumulator plus this dot state the item. Okay, because the item is now a key, not an actual text that we want in there. And let's see here, does that work? Does that give me the string that I want? Yep, and see I end up with the same strings again. H1 provolone, Gouda rye. Okay, so there's different ways you can do it when it comes to like trying to figure out ways to like parse strings, but just so you're aware of the tools that are available to you. And sometimes you might need a mix of both, of parse, using split and using like tag template literals and the way it breaks it down. But hopefully like this kind of just shows you how some of these mechanics works and gives you thinking about like how do things like the HTML tag template or the GQL tag template work. Have a great day. My name is Alex Merced. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. Make sure you join the Slack community over there at devnursery.com. Otherwise, I'll see you guys around. Yeah, follow me on Twitter as well. And thank you.